indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So public meeting of the Borough Council, Borough of New Providence, County of Union, State of New Jersey, adequate notice has been given in accordance with PL 1975, Chapter 231, annual notice of revision was made in conformance with Section 13 of the Act. Okay, we have a presentation today about the Police Department addition. Chief Hen, we have Jimmy Testa here, our CFO, and we have the architects from No Usual. So, and Captain John's here. So, you want to start, Dave?
So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. Jim Testa is our CFO. Noel Musial Sr. and Noel Musial Jr., who are the borough's architects. We were here in front of council on August 13th, just a little over a month ago, to discuss what has been a process that we've been discussing for many years in the borough about a police department renovation. The previous presentation kind of centered around the facts behind why there's a need to renovate the police department, how we came to the progress point to where we were at that presentation, and that was from an initial discussion about a renovation to essentially would be new construction at the same site. From a cost dollar average, it was just a more efficient use of the borough taxpayers' dollars to present that idea. So today, as I said in the last meeting, we didn't want to get bogged down with the finances because that's an important part of this conversation. We wanted to spend the appropriate amount of time discussing it with council. So Mr. Testa is here today to discuss that. Most of the numbers that we'll talk about related to the costs are forecasted numbers that our architects have come up with through their experience of public building design and the needs and of what is required for us to do as a public entity. So I will turn the floor over to Mr. Testa first to start talking about the finances. Specific questions, if I can help assist with them, I'll be here. And also Mr. Musial will be able to discuss any specific questions about their forecasting or the architecture itself. We did come up for purposes of this meeting to also show an artist rendering of what the potential exterior would look like. It's a first draft, but based upon the floor plan schematic that we have come to agree upon is probably the most and best use of the space. So, Mr. Testa?
You can give Okay. Hi. So what I'll do first is I'll go over the cost estimate that we received from the architects. I'll just go through it very quickly, but break it into different parts. And then from there, I'll go into forecasts of what it would cost an average taxpayer based on some assumptions. Of course, in order to do that, you have to assume, today's ratables. We have to estimate the interest rate, but we did a pretty good job with that, and I'll go over that in a second. So I believe you have a copy of the cost estimate, but for the police headquarters, total construction costs, now these are estimates, is $8,341,324. That's just construction costs. And then there's one other cost, which includes some furniture, computer hardware, data servers, AV equipment, basically technology and some moving costs, which is approximately $700,000. And then you have soft costs. Soft costs are usually all your professional services, attorney, engineering, surveys, consultants, architect, advertising, bonding, all those type of soft costs. That comes to $944,000. So you have an estimated total project cost of $9,985,324. So it's just a tad under $10 million in total costs, all in, for the project that you see behind us.
Jim, can you guys, maybe the architects can comment, how did you base the cost? Did you take the number to the street? Did you do it by average cost per square foot, RS means, just curious on your logic.
We use two things. Number one, our 40-year database that we have, and with the escalations put into that, as well as RS means. So, and to give you an example, the,
Maybe,
Clark-
maybe we should explain what RS means is it's literally like a Kelly's Blue Book, for lack of a better term, in the construction industry of what materials cost, what contracting costs in this particular region, correct?
right, and there's a location factor that you plug in, and the nearest location factor here is Newark. They have Trenton and Newark and a couple others, but the nearest for us is Newark. And it's always higher, our area, almost as high as New York City, but it's, New York City, I think, is 1.7, well,
You're nowhere near New York City.
yeah, I know, but
Thank God.
But the location factor, I think, for New York is 1.57, something like that, and we're 1.17, something like that. So, and I'm speaking from memory now. But just to give you an example, the Clark Police Headquarters, that was just recently finished, I guess, or maybe a year ago. That was about 8,700,000, something like that in round numbers. And it's 15,000 square feet, again, round numbers. So it was somewhere around just over $500 a square foot. So that's a good one, because it's kind of local, obviously. And we just recently got bids for a $20 million project for the County of Morris. We had about 8 bidders, 7 or 8 bidders, and my estimate was 21 million and change. And knock on wood, it came in at $17,750,000. One thing we are finding, and going again to the RS means, they're saying that structural steel costs are coming down substantially. Wood lumber is coming down. However, copper is still going up. So, you know, our electrical costs are probably going to be higher, but our base costs, yeah, are going to be pretty good. So I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody has a crystal ball, and that's why it's, but it seems like in Morris County, I think it was a good example. We had 7 bidders, I think, on that, and they range from one high, and you know, it's interesting how they come in. There's always one oddball that's way the hell out there, and then you got a group that's together, and then you have one that's low. And in this case, it was 17,750,000. So right after the bids come in, the county engineer comes to me and the director of emergency management, and he says, "How can we spend the money? We got to spend this money, you know, because they're getting federal money on this." So believe me, that's not a problem spending the money. So we'll spend it probably in updating some of the finishes, things like that. But we were very careful in this particular cost estimate because, and being perfectly frank with you, the one thing that scares me more than anything else is the asbestos in the building. Because I don't have a good handle on the asbestos. And it's basically, as you know, it was built as a school, and it has a trench that goes around the entire building. And in that trench, I don't think it's been remediated, is asbestos pipe. Now, fortunately, asbestos pipe is the easiest to remediate.
Did you assume it was, I mean, I'm assuming
Yeah, I assumed, and quite honestly, I have $52,000 in there. That could very easily double, to be perfectly honest, because that truly is an unknown. However, the market right now is pretty good for bidding, and that's why I've come up with a pretty aggressive schedule, because I want to hit this bidding market. Because I think right now is a good bidding market, as evidenced by 3 weeks ago when we got the bids in Morris County. God bless you.
Bless you.
Now, naturally, that's a much more expensive project, and it has a group of contractors that just go after those 15, 20, $30 million jobs. So it's a different group of contractors that we're going to be going with. And in we're just finishing a school now in Dover that is smaller than this job, but my estimate was 2,400,000. It came in at 2,500,000 and change. So our history of cost estimating is decent. You know?
I really appreciate your answer. The whole point was to qualify your background and how you came up with
Right.
that. This is not a shot in the dark,
Oh, no.
shot in the hip.
No,
So it's
no.
very good to hear.
No.
Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay, so based on the estimate project cost of $9,990,000 is what we'll call it. I rounded up a little bit. There's by the local bond law, you have to have 5%, approximately 5% as a down payment, which would be $499,500, and we do that through the normal annual budget, usually the capital improvement fund that you always offset a bond ordinance with. So you're looking at bonds authorized of $9,490,500. So what I did is I took that number and I ran just a basic debt schedule because there's so many different types of debt schedules that you could run. It could vary in years. It could vary in principal payments from year to year. I run a basic one that I do normally that gives you an average cost over the life of the bond, which is a pretty good indicator. So we base it on the 2024 tax assessments. Now keep in mind, whenever we go out for the bonds, that number is going to change a little bit. The average home value, which right now this year is approximately $740,000, I believe, the average home. And I based it on a 20-year bond, which is the normal bond length. Also, I used an estimated interest rate of 3.5%. I think that's a little bit on the high side, but I'd rather be a little bit higher than not high enough. I've seen rates come in from 3.2 to 3.4 lately. Like I said, I don't have a crystal ball. That's what's going to happen in a year or so from now. But I think 3.5 is a good estimate for us to use in terms of just trying to get an estimate cost for an average home. So with that all, you're looking at it over 20 years, it would cost an average home approximately $135 a year over a 20-year to fund this project. And like I said, I based on some assumptions, but hopefully in the next year or so, they won't change as much. If anything, I think the ratables will be going up, so that could help us. But as of right now, the cost would be about $135 for an average home.
What do you see happening to the bond rates? Do you see them staying at like this 3.4, 3.5 for a while? You know, with all the, you know, with
Since they
maybe some
cut the
rate cuts
rates,
coming up?
yeah, they cut the rates. So I would think it would get better. You hope, but it's all about what's on the street at the time you're going out for bonds. I mean, if you're the only, if you're only the bond issue in town on a certain day, you're going to get a lot of competition. If you're one of 10, you might not. So, it's all about timing.
So say you go out for a bond, in the short term and we get 3.5, but in 2 years now they're at 2.75 or 2.5. Would you be able to refinance that or no?
Well, you used to back in the day. I used to do it all the time with the Board of Ed, but there was a law that changed under, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it's not allowed. They stopped us, for municipalities or Board of Eds, you're not allowed to bring it back and try to refinance. Like I said, we used to do it all the time with other bond issues, but until the law changes, it changed recently, so maybe it'll change back, which I hope, because it's a shame that we can't take advantage of lower rates. It's a little bit of work on our end, but it's a big benefit.
Because it's a big difference, right? Even just 0.5% on $10 million.
No, absolutely. If you look at it from the investor side, they don't want you to do that. So I would think that's maybe why the law came about, that, the ones that buy a ton of bonds, the last thing they want is to get called for a lower rate. So, but no, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Do you have to bond the full 95% upfront, or can you bond a percentage over time?
Well, you could if you weren't going to do the project all 100% in the year. So if you're going to use the money in the next year or so, I don't see how you would level it, because you're going to need the money to pay for the project. If you have, if you're going to level, you really have to look at all your authorized debt to date and look at all your projects to make sure that you're not doing them all at one time because it's impossible to level. Also, when you level, you got to look at the cost of issuance. In terms, when you do a bond sale, it's very costly. And you also have to see when debt's coming off the books. For us, we have some coming off the books in 25 and 27. So could you level?
27 and
We could
29.
look at it. Excuse me?
I think it's 27 and 29
Or 27 and 29?
and 32.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 27, 29, 32. You're right. So you have a 2-year buffer there, so you probably could look at it, but again, it depends on the projects. For the police department, I know that it's an aggressive schedule to go out to bid and to do the project. So in terms of this particular project, I don't see leveling because you need money to pay the vendors.
Do you mean by leveling, do you mean laddering?
So when he means by leveling, if say you have, I'm just going to use $10 million in debt for bonds, instead of going out for 10 million in year one, you go out for 5 million year one, 5 million in year three, or you do, every, whatever it may be, which has happened in prior years.
But if you run ahead of schedule, then you have to go out and real quick, and that makes no sense to me.
Not if you're going to fund the projects
Right.
the year that you're authorizing the debt. It definitely makes sense if you're going to do bond ordinances, authorize projects that you're not planning to do for 3 to 5 years. You can get away with it, but you are authorizing the debt. So if you're authorizing the debt in a particular year, you probably want to do the projects. So it's a mindset that you have to, figure out what you want to do in terms of planning out the projects. But something like this, I don't see leveling as an option, to be totally honest with you.
And what's the length of the project from start to finish?
18 months or 2 years.
The construction will be 17 to 18 months. We're estimating that would be going out to bids. I forget what. Yeah, I think we're going out to bids in April, and then award in May, start construction, and be done in 2027, December or January of 2028.
Can I go back to construction costs?
Yes.
I think we have a lot of homework to do on the financing side as well. But, so the last time in August when you guys presented, there's a significant jump between the construction costs that we might have saw in August to now. Maybe you can just comment on that. Is it just construction costs going up, or material costs going up, or scope change perhaps? I'm just
Well,
curious.
we always base it on the square footage, and Chief has been very good at telling us to keep the square footage down to a minimum. So it's basically, we keep refining it, and frankly, as the next 3 phases, we will refine that cost estimate at each phase as we get further depth into the project, and we know what our mechanical systems are going to be. As an example, we're looking in a possibility of maybe keeping the existing structure and raising a roof that has some issues with the critical structure requirements for the seismic, where we have to have cross bracing because none of it, the existing, without getting into a lot of detail, that's one of the things that we're trying to look at now to see if there's a cost savings by simply raising it and redoing the structure from a seismic point of view. But we're concerned that our structural engineer is saying, I'm looking at it, but I don't think it's going to be economical. He thinks it's more economical just to tear it down because that building was built in the 50s and 60s to a different set of codes. And now, because it's a police headquarters, it's not a school, it's a critical structure, and there's certain requirements. So,
I just want to add to Mr. Musil's point. So the first iteration that we were building off of was an early 2023 estimate with a building that was slightly smaller.
Okay.
When we started to dial in also on the project, we realized that configuration probably wasn't the most efficient for really what the project would look like in 25 or 30 years. So when you start to configure essentially what happened was we flipped spaces. The patrol side was on the south side of the building, went to the north side, which expanded the footprint of the building a little bit. I don't think that there's $1 million in costs associated with the rise in pricing, but there certainly was.
Scope, you
Yeah,
answered
the scope
question.
changed a
No,
little bit,
obviously, it's
so.
a moving, you're still designing, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was my only.
But there is about a 16-month gap between the first estimate and this estimate.
Thank you.
I think it's important to know that that police department, when it was renovated, was back in '82. So I mean, that's 40-something years ago. Everything has changed. And the requirements that you need to function as a police department has changed drastically. It looks nothing like it did 40 years ago. I just want to make sure that spending this type of money, this investment, this police department you'll be able to function for another 40 years out of it.
So it was certainly a question that was asked by Councilman Cogan in our previous sessions, and I agree that, we have met internally as an administrative team. We also have put together a team of our younger officers and officers that have come from other police departments. One, to pick their brains about what are we missing here that you've had in other agencies, but two, how are you seeing policing changing, in your, short tenure, and where do you see it going? And while we can predict some of those needs, I think training is probably the most inundating thing that we've seen probably over the past 6 years that I don't think we ever predicted. And we just don't have appropriate training space for what's being requested and mandated by the state. Accreditation changed a lot of those needs, which didn't exist 20 years ago. With all those things in mind, we really believe that this building can be scaled if we needed to capture some space and reallocate it if that was the need. But it will suit our needs well past any of our useful lives here.
Just to expand on Councilman Cogan's question. So Chief, this versus the last version, there's an increase of how much? Just trying to remember.
It's about $1 million.
Okay. Could you do, if it's possible in the future, it would be very good if there are, and to your point, you're still doing design changes and you're sharpening your pencils and things of that nature, hopefully. But any further iterations of this, if we could show a delta, old
Yeah.
version versus new version,
Absolutely.
so we could see by line item what has changed,
Sure.
and then outlining the reason why, I think that would be very helpful and appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, one of my questions, Mr. Rizzo, because I did have the prior version and this version, and I'm happy to hear Chief is saying the scope has changed, but the fee structure for your fees have gone up, obviously, because the project has increased. And other things have increased, but I think you qualify that by saying it's a different project than it was from a year ago. So to
And-
Pete's point, it would be nice to see.
Yeah. That's not a problem.
No, unfortunately, we started looking at this in 2015 with Chief Uselli. And then Chief Gazaway came in, and then we were planning to get this thing started by 2020. And then
COVID.
COVID hit,
Mhm.
and it got pushed off to the side. So, I mean, it's not like we haven't, looked into this extensively over the years. So, I appreciate all the work you've done on this because, I know you scaled it back a lot. And,
Oh, floor.
yeah, no,
Oh,
and I know that. I mean, this isn't a want, this is a need. And I think that's important for the public to understand. I mean, Homeland Security comes in here, says it's inadequate. The state comes in here, they look at everything every year. I mean, they pass us, but they say we have deficiencies. So it's up to us that it's our responsibility to make sure that we take care of those deficiencies. And this is truly the best way to do it, to bring it up to code and, make sure it's good for another 40 years or so.
Go ahead.
What's the debt that's coming off in 27? Do we know the amount?
Yeah. Give me a minute.
There's a 9 and 9 and a 7. Or 10, 10 and 8.
So it's always good to look at, in terms of the debt payment, the principal
Debt
payment
service, yep.
in that year, because that gives you a good inkling. So $620,000 in debts coming off the books in 2027
Our payment.
of an original issue back in 2012 of a little under 9 million. But the interest rate was much lower at that time. You're talking that between a 2 and a 2.2%, depending on the year, because there's a difference. So it's much lower than the rates are now. So it's not equal dollar for dollar. Just so you know.
There's about a 9 million principal, lower interest rate, 6.25 debt service coming off
2027 is the last year of that payment, correct?
Okay.
I would just comment, Matt, that I think the finance committee still, Diane and I have a lot of work to do about the financing plan. The committee process still has to be intact. I think the capital review team still has to look at the
Yeah.
existing capital funding. So we still have quite a bit of homework.
I'm just trying to get my arms around some of the
Yeah.
numbers, that's all.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if you talked, if I missed it, I apologize if I did. The renovation of the Old Borough Hall, and what's the timing gonna be on that? So like, is that gonna be done before, obviously, you guys start this? Because you need someplace to be, right?
Yeah, so we are literally planning to move right into that building as it exists.
As is.
Outside of like maybe painting some walls, cleaning carpets, and cleaning the bathrooms.
Okay. The
Um,
bathrooms aren't bad, actually.
Nobody's been in there for a year, so we don't like sharing space. We don't like sharing spaces with mice and spiders. But
But the bell rings all the time, so
there are a few very minor security issues. We just have to fortify some doors that can be done in a very efficient, inexpensive manner. But we've gone to the building and we know this is outside of using the basement space, because I think that space has to be probably attended to with probably just some environmental issues. But with that being said, we're going to cram ourselves in there. If the time would come, we'd go right over there.
Okay, so it's not like we have to, finance this project first to get it up to speed
No.
for you to move in.
No, so everything would be temporary for us. This was brought up in the prior meeting also about a renovation of that space. And Mr. Musil's group forecasted about a $4 million price tag to bring that building to code, right? So that it was ready to go, not as a police department, just as office space. With the addition of an elevator, if we as the government agency still utilize the building to bring it up to certain requirements. So when you take that $4 million number and compare it to the number that we're looking at, and we haven't even begun to design it to be a police department, we're already forecasting that it's first of all, it doesn't have enough space. But with that being said, the number will outpace what the cost of a new construction here would be.
I think, Lisa, this number, we asked, I think it was Councilman DeSarno asked, what would the cost to be to renovate that building? And you guys were kind enough to give us.
because that was one of the renditions that
That's-
has been
Yeah.
talked about over the years that we've been talking about this. Can we use this? Can we use that? Can we, so.
Yeah, and also, Dan, I'm glad you mentioned that. Just to point out, we had an engineering meeting with Chief Penn, Keith, and Bernadette to kind of give us the history of all the renditions you've gone through. Can we move here? Can we renovate there? So you've answered all of our questions so that new construction is definitely the most efficient, effective way to go. And the cost of renovating new construction versus renovating existing definitely makes sense to go with the new building. So just wanted to put that on there.
Penny wise, pound foolish. You have a lot of sayings in my family. So, and I think we also had discussed then and with the finance committee, and to Al's point, make sure that this can be utilized for the next 40 years. So thank you for incorporating all that.
Any other questions?
I think we just have a lot of other work to do as
Yeah.
we get more information.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Alex, that you discussed, committees need to still do some work on this.
Yeah.
I would imagine finance and capital.
Yes.
Jim, you articulated some numbers tonight. They were sort of related to this project, not from a macro town sense. It sounds like that'll be coming at a later meeting. Am I correct?
I just focused on the
Yeah,
police
that's fine.
addition and renovation.
I just wanted to make sure it'll be at the next meeting when we're talking from a macro sense. We'll have time to ask those questions at that point.
Yes.
Okay, good.
I mean, you can just, on an overall standpoint, I just want to make sure I understand what you mean
From
by
a
that.
town financing standpoint,
Yes.
so from an overall town perspective.
So what you're saying is
Talking about-
prior bond issues that are already authorized compared to what's on the books already? Within
Separate
the-
from this.
Yes. Yeah. Right now, we're focusing on this, so they have to understand the cost of the project. And then as council and mayor, we have to look
Sure.
at the
The bigger
overall.
picture.
The bigger, the
rest
bigger
of the big
picture.
picture on how.
Yeah, the other capital needs of the community, taking
Got it.
that all into
Understood.
account from a macro standpoint. So that's great, as long as I understand the process. Thank you. Are we gonna go over, what we have, is that your pictures over there? Or oh, good. We're gonna do that too?
It's up to you.
Yeah, I'd like to know what we're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Like to see the rendering, sure.
I can see one, but I can't see the other.
The other one's kind of the floor plan.
Oh, the floor
Not the layout.
Yeah, for
It looks
six-
like Robert's,
can't
it
give
looks
out
like
the floor
Robert's
plan.
school.
Yeah.
Well, it was a school at one point.
Well, so, this would be, taken from, sorry, maybe you can't see this.
That's the one.
Oh, there we go. All right.
So this vantage point, here would be standing, approximately right here, looking towards the entrance of the, new court and police and, building addition here. So the addition would be this portion of the sheet, and then the existing buildings over here. So this would be the entrance to the police and court, with the brick picking up on the existing facility. This would be, we can't really disclose or share the configuration, but, you know, this portion over here would be what we'd see from the parking lot.
Where are the jail cells? No, I'm kidding.
One way to
Those-
find out.
you'll see those later.
Probably more than one.
So that long rectangle on the one to the left,
This
on the
here
one to the
is
left,
like- is
that, the long
portion right
rectangle next to it, is that the existing
That's the
building?
existing
So
municipal center.
the police department is that square attached to the rectangle?
That's correct, right.
I'm not good at this stuff.
We're slightly to the left of where he is now.
You got it. The existing facility is this dashed line here.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, the top is where we walk in. So
Yeah.
the right is where we are, like we are. You should have a UR here.
Yes, okay.
Where are they?
Yeah, we're right about
Yeah,
up there.
Yeah.
And that little green thing's a courtyard.
So again, this is a first step, but trying to pick up on the materiality of the existing building to try to knit it together.
As modern as it is, it looks like it was always there. That's positive. I know architects like to hear
Thank you. We put in a concrete sign, so to speak, right in front of the
Yeah.
flagpole.
Yes.
That's a seat on the other side,
Yeah.
and it also gives some protection
Right.
to the building.
You can drive your car in.
Right.
Like the
Flowers.
things that they have in front of buildings in New York.
And the gas meters and all the,
So
we're
right now,
hiding
gas
it.
meters are right here. Right there essentially. Screening those in, to try to not have those be what you first look at, as you're entering the building. So,
Nice.
thank you.
That's great.
Any other questions?
Well,
No, thank you for your timely
Thank you.
information.
Thank you very
for
much.
being
Thank you very
here.
much.
okay, do you have any public comments? Seeing no one, I declare the public comments closed. Okay. Motion for adjournment?
Not adjourned.
So moved. Oh,
Yeah,
no,
this one
Yeah,
adjourns,
you're
yeah.
adjourned.
Huh?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None, so be it.